after knowing the general concept of texturing, next thing we're going to tap is the shading tab. Once we click that, you will see this looks a little bit different compared to what we had under the layout. And for yours, by default, Blender settings are actually going to have another window over here on the left hand side. I'm just closing one to making the bigger views a little bit nicer and cleaner. And what you can do when you look at down here on the left hand side, it's also still going to be the different window. What you can do here, you can go to here to select the shader editor, so it will look like this. The only difference is between this one to that one is the world and object. So I'm actually on the left hand side, I'm using this one for the world. Basically this is where the HDRI image was about. If I click the render view version, so you will see this environment. And again, when we navigate around in here, we're still seeing the environment of this bathroom lighting. So what we need to do here, I need to go to the camera icon over here, and under the film, click transparent. So now you won't see anything around the environment when you're navigating the scene. We want to start with the top cap, which is the most easiest one. So we will go click new, and then we are adding a new material. Usually you will have a default name, which is called material. So what I usually do is just gonna click that to rename it red cap. Okay, and also because we already have our model build, the reference image no longer important to lay it out for the layout. So what I'm going to do here, I'm just going to drag this image, hit G, X, coming out, and now you will see what's the reference image now, and I'm gonna change the opacity to 1. You can see this image already, and I already adding a materials for this top cap, but the thing is, it still looks no difference compared to the rest of this body. It was because whenever you go to the render view, you have automatic default setting for material. So this is what the default setting material looks like. Once I start clicking and to do some adjustment on this, you will see the differences. So as you can see here, these individual boxes or squares, windows, whatever you call it, these are supposed to call node. So without this node is linked by noodles. It's more like a programming. And what we're going to do for this top cap is all procedural. So procedural texturing, remember from the last video, is all about the math. We just gonna simply using all these windows, the program in the nodes to program materials. This is called principal BSDF. So primarily this is the most popular one by default. You can see there's a lot of settings you can do, but we are only going to covering some of the settings that we will use for our realistic rendering. A lot of stuff that you probably don't use. So I'm just gonna walk you through to cutting off some unnecessary distractions about the settings and to show you what actually works in here. So we're gonna start with the base color. So as you can see here, is setting up in the white, but it's not 100% pure white. So we can just kind of changing any color we want to kind of getting the. And as you can see here, when I'm moving around here, you can see there's some issues with this top cap. But quickly I noticed on the right hand side, because I already having the bottle back up, and we actually overlying a lot of stuff going on here. So if I'm just gonna uncheck, I'll close this back up, then we actually just having normal look of this materials now, which is what it's supposed to look like. If we going into the base color, you can see there's a color wheel. You can do RGB way to kind of select color according to red, green, blue, or using hue, saturation, and value. Values means brightness. You can change that in the for color, or you can use a hex colors, which is a kind of coded code to represent the exact color. So some of you think, well, how do I know this color is matched that? Well, in the CG world, I would say don't really hang up on to being exact color, because a lot of times your viewers will not tell the difference. But what we can do is we can getting things really close as it is, at the same time as a product rendering, we also need to make the product looks nice. So what we can do here for this base color, for this one, I know we can just kind of tweaking it, whatever, doing the saturations, getting the perfectly right to color. It might be pretty challenging. It take forever. And the shortcut key we can use is just gonna hit E. Certainly when you're making sure you need to move your mouse cursor to there and hit E, now you have a eyedropper. And then you can just pick up a color in the scene. Whatever the scene in here, it doesn't really need to be a picture. You can eyedrop any color. So hit E, you can even pick this green. Yeah, as long as you want. So now we just have a basic color here, and you can see here if I click the highlight, it looks pink. So I'm just going to pick a kind of middle tone in here. So far it's okay. While it still feels like these are quite different, we are going to continue our list. Okay, so the subsurface color, all these settings are primarily used for when you texturing human skins. Sometimes when the lighting passing through the human skin, especially some like lighter, thinner areas like our human ears, you will see there's subsurface colors in that areas. And the next thing we are actually going to need to talk about is this metallic. Okay, so what this metallic is about? Interestingly, for this settings, you can drag from 0 to all the way to 1. The correct way to use this is if this material a metal, or this material is not a metal? Then if this material is metal, you're supposed to grab the 1. If not, just put in 0. So you're not supposed to put any numbers in between. So that's a kind of like important one to remember. So for this look, I'm actually want to have kind of like a metallic feeling about this. So I'm just gonna grab it all the way to 1. And then you start realizing, well, this still doesn't look like a metal, right? Yes, because if we go down here, our roughness is still pretty high. If you are going to use as a metal, is actually supposed to go to pretty low. I don't recommend go to all the way to 0, but I would just save a little bit to adding a little bit realistic on that. So you can see here, it's the metal. And also same time, I really don't want this metallic. You can see here, it's not that smooth. So I'm just gonna dial it in a little bit, just giving that a metallic feature, but it has a little bit of roughness going on here. Okay, specular, obviously you can see, you can making it looks more specular on the surface, or you can make it disappear. So usually by default is 0.5. I can leave it there unless you want to do some creative materials that you want. Okay, so next thing I just gonna quickly cover this, the sheen. The sheen, usually when you're working with fabric, so you usually have a sheen when you're lighting a fabric, and you can use a sheen and a sheen tint to really accentuate that a little bit glowing sheen type of look. You can do that. The next thing we're going to talk about is clear coat. You can see here, if we go to the top of this cap, you can see here we have some kind of like rough and matte going on here. Adding a clear coat, if I'm dragging all the way to 1, I'm actually adding a very thin layer of a clear coat, and now you can see the reflections of this HDRI image. You can see there's a window for the front of the bathroom, right? So you can have this clear coat added on, and same times you can even change the clear coat roughness to make it look a little bit rough, so it's not that clear. So basically you're just adding another layer onto that, which I really like when we actually building this top of cap. I kind of want to have like this nice look finish packaging on this wine, so I just add it on over here. Okay, and for this IOR means the reflection index of reflection. So this is the website that you can search all these materials that you want to use when you do that. And if you're if you're gonna adding a gold, you're gonna have this number over here. For water is 0.33 almost. So you have this website, you have tons of information about the IOR, so you can do that. But usually for me, for a lot of product rendering, I've put this in default. 1.45 is okay. If you really want to be precise and physically correct, you can look up that window and to get that done. Okay. For emission, we can even make this cap to really like a light resource, so we can actually turn into light. But for realistic looking, this is not going to be the right thing to do. And then we have a normal part is that we can actually hook maps into there. Within this principal BSDF, you can actually do quite a bit of materials. So next thing I'm going to add it on is a little bit more to adding some subtle details on the materials. As you can see here, it's very nice and smooth, but it feels like in the reality, if you look at the materials, it's not going to be perfectly smooth like this. Although we're adding some roughness, but still there's no any bumps or anything. It's just not, doesn't look very real. We are going to adding some bumps on the surface. So when you talk about bumps, you definitely need a bump node. So what we do here, Shift A to adding a bump node. We can click the search and just type bump. Okay, here we leave it in here. And remember, we already mentioned something very similar, which is the bump map and displacement map. Remember, normal map. And the normal map is being a little bit special because it has like purplish color special image. And the bump node is going to be black and white, and displacement map is going to need to hook over here, not in there. So only bump map and the normal map is going to hook on the normal. So that's just kind of small detail that I want to bring it up to help you guys memorize the whole thing. Anyway, so we have bump node, we're going to hook in here, which means we need some actual textures to control the bump. So now we are going to introduce a texture, it's called noise texture. And we're going to do Shift A, search, type noise, and noise texture. And having this node in here, because we already enabled the node wrangler add-on, remember we have a short videos about how to enable that. We can do Shift and Control and left click. We can quickly view what's this texture is looking at. So right now, quickly hook something with that. So we can see also in this texture, it's actually just black and white with some kind of random noise over here. So we're looking through this right here. So we're gonna using this noise texture control with bump, and then to effecting on this principal BSDF, eventually come up with a final textures that looks pretty nice and realistic. Okay, so what I'm seeing here is this is kind of too big a patch of what I'm trying to achieve. So I'm gonna scale down the size of the black. So I'm gonna actually increase it. So we're gonna have a smaller spot. So I'm going to try to 200. Just really testing out. So 200 now, you can see there's a lot of noises and spot dots right here, but some of them are getting a little bit stretched. All right, a little bit different. So you see here, this is kind of a little bit stretched, and this part is kind of a little bit compressed. What I'm missing is actually some node texture coordinator. So what I will do here, I'm gonna click the noise texture and hit Control T. Now we quickly adding a mapping node and also texture coordinate node. So what I can do here, by default is coming from the generated. I want to hook this one with the object and watch what happened in the texture here. So now if I'm after hooking with the object, all these stretchings, everything is gone. So this is a very quick and easy way to really getting the procedural texturing applying on the materials correctly. So I'm just gonna using that. For the mapping node, you can see we have some locations. We can rotate the materials, and we can even scale the materials. So if we can drag, you can see here is rotating, and we can change the location. Because this is a general noise texture, it doesn't really matters if you changing the location, but always nice to having that sometimes when we use it. So next thing what I'm going to do here is I'm going to to reconnect this principal BSDF, and we're trying to hooking all these onto the principal BSDF. So of course, after having the noise textures, I'm going to hook this to the height. Okay, and now we're gonna making sure this normal hook to the normal, and watch. Okay, so suddenly something going on here, and it looks pretty terrible because it doesn't look that good, simply because the bump is, the noise is very strong. So we will need to adjusting that. A common mistake, people just kind of dialing the strength and to do a very small number. The correct way is supposed to really change the distance, not supposed to be 1.0. In the Blender is talking about 1 meter. So we need to do a little bit smaller. So we're just gonna 0.001, should be fine. And suddenly you can feel that more settle. Now it's a good time to control the strength. Okay, so I'm just gonna really dial it down pretty low. As you can see here, we still can see this on these under the lighting side, but for this, for me, it looks too uniformed, and also this is like too small details. So what I'm actually going to scale, not 200, I'm going to try 100. So yeah, I think that looks much better, and also I gonna dial this thing down even more, just very subtle, and you wouldn't actually notice that much, but it's there, right? So I'm gonna even actually dial it down. So I think about 0.002 looks nice. You can see here, this is some details we added on. If I'm actually going to cut it, holding Control and right click, and is not there. And then if I'm hooking it back, watch. Just adding some different variations on the material on the surface, it just make it much more pleasing, or also more photorealistic. Because in the real world, nothing is perfect. There's no super perfect smooth materials like that. Okay, so we're having this. Again, what we are doing right now is just generally mapping out a materials, because this is not our final lighting. Remember, the HDRI we use just for temporary use for lighting purpose, to actually seeing something under the light. Watch, if I'm quickly changing things and the HDRI, gonna hit X and applying a different material of different HDRI environment, you will see this is the one we use in the bathroom. This is the one we use under the bridge. You can see that suddenly the color, everything looks very different. It's just because the environment, the lighting has been changed. So you will see how important the lighting it is when you actually rendering out the product. So that's what we want trying to avoid, but at the same time, I want to let you guys know why we're doing it, and why we're not tweaking it at this moment. Okay, so we are finishing the top of cap. So this is all the top of cap is procedural. It's because it's all based on the numbers, no maps. There's no additional images attached. So that's kind of the stuff that we were working on now. Next thing we are going to working on is the wine, actual wine. So we're gonna hide the bottle body and the label. So we are only working solo for the wine inside. As you know, the wine is very it's a liquid, of course. It's very reflective, super smooth. We don't have a specific materials called wine, but we will kind of accentuate that look to do that as close as it can be. So what we need to do now, we're gonna do the same thing, select the wine, adding a new material. Now we're gonna rename as wine. Okay, so now we have the wine going on here. Again, we're gonna changing the color for that. This time we are going to do something a little bit different, because for the wine we wanted to do something two different colors, not one single solid color. So that's what we trying to achieve. And I'm adding a mix RGB shader, Shift A, and mix RGB right here. So we have two colors going on here. If I'm pick one, just some random pretty bright red and a red a little bit dark over here. So as you can see here, color 1, color 2. Here's a factor, so you can dial whichever it is. So what's happening here is this factor is controlling how these two colors mix in the shader. So if I'm dial this factor all the way to 0, it means 100% this top color is going to be showing. If I'm dragging this factor to 1, that will be 100% of color 2 will be showing. Okay, so if I'm dragging it to number 0 and I'm hooking this color to the base color, and now you can see here, this is exactly what this color is about. It's right now showing number 1. If I'm dragging to 1, now showing number 2. So if I'm dragging to 50, it means mixing half and half. Okay, so that's just how it works. But you're gonna say, well, after it's mixed, it's just gonna be a solid color anyway, right? It doesn't look like a liquid or anything. So what we need to do here, we are going to introduce a transparent shader. So it's more like a glass. You can either use glass or you can use transparent. So I'm gonna do transparent. I'm gonna do Shift A to do transparent. So you can see here is translucent and transparent. We are going to use the transparent. And here, if I'm just simply hook the transparent to the surface, it's just transparent, right? You can see their outline, but nothing showing. So what we need to do here, we are going to mix these two with a mix shader. So do Shift A, type mix shader right here. And the same thing, remember, as you can see here, the factors is working as that factor, and shader 1, shader 2. So again, if I'm hooking this one over here, that one over top, and if I'm moving the factor all the way to 1, it's out about the second one, the second shader, which is the transparent. If I'm changing the factor all the way to 0, it's showing the other half. So from the principle BSDF, so you can see here at this moment it's all the way to 0. So we are loading this color into here as the base color. With all these settings, we loaded in another 2 here and this shader. Because it was all the way to 0, we load everything in back to the output. So this is how it works, and which is very important to understand how the factor control things and how each individual plug or input is responsible for. Next thing we are going to do, of course, since we're adding the principal BSDF, I want some input for that. So I just gonna set this one as default, 0.5 should be fine. It's not really a big deal. So now you can see here is semi-transparent, right? It's okay, but the color still looks one piece of solid one. So we're gonna tweaking around something over here. And before we get into the color, one thing I really need to fix is that if it's going to be a liquid, it's not going to have any roughness, right? So what we can do here, we are going to dial it down to 0, to there's no roughness because it's water, right? And also because it's liquid, the IOR we can use to be safe, we can do just 1.33, which is the water, and it's gonna actually make a little better. Again, what you're looking right now, still not the finalized materials. It looks a little bit still pretty fake, and also the lighting is playing an important role. And next thing we want to do, just kind of to changing the mix of these two colors. What we'll need to do here, we are going to adding another node. It's called layer weight. Layer weight, okay? Here, and we are going to using hooking the phasing to use as a factor here. So now we can control this blend to really control how much each color is gonna mix. So another quick way to see how this thing works, we are going to use Shift and Control and left click. And now if we holding the Shift key, we can see what's going on. Apparently, right now the viewing layers is hooking on the top. It's supposed to go with the facing. So we're gonna hold Shift and Control, click one more time to making sure we're viewing what we're trying to do. So now it's good time to holding shift to kind of dragging the thing in. So you want to have some variation. You want to have the color in the center areas slowly fading out on the edge. So this is black and white. If you have some experience in Photoshop and you know how layer mask works, this is how I memorize. In here, we are actually using two different colors. So the 0 is actually representing the white, and the number 2, which is 1, is representing the dark color. So you don't need to know too much behind the numbers and programming. We just need to know that we're using this to kind of blending these two colors. You can control the variation, making sure this fills in a little bit better in this way. So that's all good. What we need to do here, we are just going to Control Shift and C, principal SDF, and then finally see this is what's going to have for this wine color. I know it still looks pretty reddish and it doesn't look that realistic, but it's all good because again, it's a temporary setup. We will perfecting the lighting later in the next video. Okay, so this is pretty much what I want to share with you in this tutorials. In the next one, we are going to introduce a new concept, a UV unwrap.